I led them with cords of kindness, with the bands of love. And I became to them as one who eases the yoke on their jaws, and I bent down to them and fed them.
Shalom, shalom, folks. It's Brother Tyndall from Something to Chew On. Coming in, going to do another read-along update for you. And hopefully, give you something uplifting, encouraging, if you will. We're going to talk about Hebrew poetry today. But first, let's do this update and get it out of the way. Actually, first, let me say this. I've had a couple of new subscribers to the channel. For all those new subscribers, I say thank you. I appreciate it. I don't have to do this. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. You know the routine, but I'll leave it at that. Okay, for the update. The last one that I made that I had to get uploaded was 2 Corinthians. That's been done. It was finished. I just had to get it uploaded. Well, I uploaded it on Wednesday. That seems to be the routine I've gotten into. Uploading the new ones on Wednesday. I'm not saying that's going to be the case from here on out, but that's the way it's been working the past, month or so. Okay, there was actually no vote last week. I just decided to go ahead, considering that the book of Job was the last of the long books from the Tanakh, or the Old Testament, that I hadn't made yet. I just decided to go ahead and do that one. Okay, the status of that one. Hadn't completely finished the entire playlist yet. I'm probably 90% done with it. I haven't got it completely done yet. But as always, most high willing, I'll get that made in the next couple of days and I'll get it uploaded. I've stopped somewhere in the mid-30s, somewhere around the chapter 30. I forget exactly what it is. I probably should have looked, but it doesn't matter. It's got 42 chapters in the whole book, so I probably got, less than 10 chapters left to make, and they're fairly short chapters, so it won't take me very long. Just have to sit down, find the time to do it, and then sit down to upload them, which most likely, if things go like they have been, it'll probably be Wednesday. Well, considering that Job is one of the longer books, hence why I went ahead and made it to get it out of the way. I may do like I did the, 2 Chronicles. I'll upload it in sections, 10, 15, 20 videos one day, and then the next day come back and do the rest of them. I may do it over a 3-day period, whatever. But sometime this week, most high willing, I'll get them finished made, and I'll get them uploaded. Okay, there's that. Okay, now, like I said, I did that last week, so I didn't call for a vote. But today, we're going to call for a vote. And like I said in previous videos, I'm pretty much finished with all the longer books, both in the Tanakh and the Brit Hadashah, the Old Testament and the New Testament, however you want to, phrase that. But the ones I have left from the Old Testament are the minor prophets, and that would be the shorter minor prophets, like Zechariah, and I think that one's done. The ones that, 10, 15 chapter long minor prophet books or lesser prophets, I've done those. I've already got those done. The ones I don't have done are the ones that are short. Same too with the Brit Hadashah, or the New Testament. I've got the Gospels done, the book of Acts, Hebrews, Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, and Revelation. Those are the longer books. The ones I have left are the Pauline epistles and then just the general epistles. And they're all pretty short books, 3, 4, 5, 6 chapters at the most, I think. So it's not going to take long. But like I say, the short books of the minor prophets and the epistles of the New Testament. That's the books I have left. So today we're going to vote. And we're going to take either one of the minor prophets or one of the epistles. And the vote today is going to be between the book of Micah or the book of Galatians. So pause the video and go down and vote in the comment section below. Okay? Okay, now with that said, don't forget to vote, like I say, Micah or Galatians. And I'll work on those in the coming week. And or I'll announce the winner next video. I'm sorry, I'm confused. Okay, here we go. Okay, now I said Hebrew poetry. Let me get all this stuff pulled up. I got quite a few things I was going to show today, other than just the normal program where the biblical text is. So let's. Okay. All right. Like I say, today's topic, we're going to talk about Hebrew poetry. I'm going to go ahead and tell everybody here, I'm going to preface this entire teaching with this. I am not a Hebrew expert. I can't speak Hebrew, but I can use the Strong's Concordance, and I can read, which I do a lot of. A lot of reading, not only the text, but commentaries and, that type of stuff. Read all kind of things. But let's start off with this. I'm going to read a psalm. It's a short one. We're going to read it. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk about this for a moment. And I know I say this all the time. I'll be brief today. This one should be pretty brief today. I'm not going to go too long. But hopefully, somewhere in something I say, it'll be uplifting and encouraging to you. Maybe you'll glean a nugget of some truth that perhaps you didn't know. But with that, let's go and let's read this. I'm going to read Tehillim, or Psalms 121. I'm going to read it out of the Scripture Version 2009 first. Okay? Let's just read this. And remember, this is considered one of the poetical books. Hebrew poetry, if you will. So let's bring this up and let's read this. Here, let me put this on full screen so it will be, hopefully, you will be able to see this. Let me see. Let me try this again. See if I can't make it just a little bit bigger. Yeah, I think you should be able to see this. Okay, let's transition over and let's look at this. Like I said, Psalm or Tehillim 121. I'm going to read this out of the Scripture Version 2009. Okay, here we go. It says, I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, maker of the heavens and earth. He does not allow your foot to be moved. He who watches over you does not slumber. See, he who is guarding Yisrael neither slumbers nor sleeps. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is your guard. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is your shade at night. Let me read that again. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is your guard. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is your shade at your right hand. There we go. The sun does not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh guards you from all evil. He guards your being. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh guards your going out and your coming in now and forever. Many of us have read that. No problem. We've read it before. Now, I'm going to point out something that I come across a while back that I thought was interesting. We'll put it that way. And hopefully, it's as encouraging to you as it was to me. Okay. Let me see where I start on this. Okay. We know in the Western world, in English, we'll say that. In English, or in the Western world, poetry is usually associated with the rhyming of the end of each verse or stanza, right? Roses are red, violets are blue. But in Hebrew, that's not exactly how things work. Hebrew poetry, and many of you may know this, just follow along with me. I'm starting with a general concept, and I'm going to work down to a specific idea. But in Hebrew poetry, most often what you have, it's not necessarily the rhyming or should I say, similar sounds that we deal with. In Hebrew poetry, most often what you're dealing with is similar concepts. Meaning one verse, you often hear them like in the Proverbs, two verses that are coupled together, couplets, meaning they're saying the same thing, but they're saying it in two different ways. They're dealing with concepts as opposed to the literal sounds of the words being pronounced. Does that make sense? And this verse, or this psalm, is an example of this idea, if you will. Okay, now with that said, I'm gonna say this. If you go look, it doesn't list it here. I'll show you in a second what I'm talking about, but it doesn't show it in the Scripture Version 2009. If you look, like say your King James Bible here, let me pull this up on the screen and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Let's go back and I'll show you here, and then I'll show you in the King James what I'm talking about. Let's just transition one more time. Here. Actually, let me show you what I'm talking about, and then you can see the omission of it. Just give me just a second. Okay. I'll bring this back up and I'm going to show you something. This is the same psalm, but this is from the King James Version. Well, notice right here, it says a song of degrees, right? Okay, now let's look at this same psalm in the English Standard Version. Basically what I'm getting at is I'm pointing out this title, this heading for the psalm, okay? If you look at it in the English Standard Version, see, it says it right here, a song of ascent. And that's technically not in the text of the psalm. It's simply, I don't know exactly the term for it, but it's a descriptor of what the psalm is talking about. Okay, now let's go back to the Scripture Version 2009, and you'll notice that little section head there is not there. You see this? It's not there. It just has what psalm it is, and it goes straight into the psalm. We see that? Okay, I just simply want to point that out. Let's go back to my face here for a second. I just simply want to point that out. And these quote-unquote song of degrees or song of ascents would be Psalm 120 through Psalm 134. It's 15 Psalms, and they're all back-to-back. And like I said, I do a lot of reading, and I've read, and I've heard people teach, preach, however, this many different ways. And a lot of times, most often, the most common thing, theory, we'll say theory because it can't be proven, is that these songs were sung by pilgrims who were going up to, catch that, songs of ascent. That word degrees, it has the idea of steps, ascending, going up. Makes sense? Hence why the English Standard Version says ascent. Some refer to these as songs of going up, as in going up to Jerusalem. That's what they equate it to. Because we all know that the temple was up on the mount, and Jerusalem itself was up on a mount, built up in the mountains. So when the pilgrims, 3 times a year at the feast, when they would go up to Jerusalem, hence why all through the text, go up to Mount Zion, go up to the temple, go up to Jerusalem, go up. It's because their elevation, literally, they're climbing the mountain, going up in altitude, right? But people will teach these, and the most common teaching, belief, whatever, is that these were songs sung by pilgrims as they were going to the temple for the 3 prescribed feast days where they had to appear before the temple. And they would sing these as they were going up. And that's what a lot of people teach, believe, and I've heard that numerous times. Now, not to say that it's true or not true, but like I said, we can't actually prove that. Now, there are other things that people say that what that little title refers to is that perhaps the Levitical priests sang these. And they even get even more specific. And we'll read something here in a minute that'll point out what I'm talking about. But they get more specific and they say that the temple had 15 steps. And you'd have a Levite standing on each one of these steps. 15 of these songs of degrees or ascent or goings up, you have 15 of them, and there were 15 steps up to the temple. And you would have a Levitical priest standing on each one of these steps, and they would sing each one of these songs. Maybe this is true, maybe it's not. A lot of this conjecture, speculation, if you will, is based off of Talmudic tradition, specifically the Mishnah. Now, that's not to say it's not true. I'm just saying that's where a lot of this comes from. Now, we can't verify any of that because, you can go to, let's see, the same concept. A lot of the commentaries will point to First Chronicles chapter. I believe it was chapter 15, where David takes the ark up into the temple, so to speak, and they bring it up. That's the word. Now that's in the text, but that and all this stuff about the pilgrims perhaps singing these on their way, to the feast days. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. The Levitical priest singing, standing on each of the stairs. There's no way to prove any of that. Like I said, it's based on, for the most part, all that stuff's based on Talmudic tradition. Now, that's not to say it's not true. It's just simply to say we don't know if it's true or not. But what is true is that this is Hebrew poetry. And there's a concept that can be seen in these Psalms. Like I said, Psalm 120 through Psalm 134. You can see it. But this one is the one that it's most prevalent in. Okay? Now, with that said, let's go read. I'm going to read something. I've got part of it highlighted, but I'm going to read all of this. And it mentions basically what I've just talked about. And this comes from the book by Alfred Edersheim. If any of y'all know who he is. He did a book. What was the name of the one book he wrote? I forget what it was called. It's about the temple and the temple services and all that. A very popular book from like the late 1800s. But this is another book he read. Let me pull this up. I'm going to bring this up and I'm going to read something out of it that speaks to what I'm talking about here. Let me find this again. Where's it at? Yeah, here it is. This is from his book. Let's see. It's going to be page 382 and 383 from his book titled The Golden Diary of Heart Converse with Jesus in the Book of Psalms. Like I said, I forget. Let me look. Do I still have it pulled up? Yeah, hang on a second. I'll tell you. This book looks like it was copyrighted in 1866. And this book can be found on Google Books. I'll put the link to it. And it's downloadable. You can download it and read it in PDF form. I'll put the link to it in the description of the video. Okay? So, if anybody wants to go look into this, read this book, whatever, hey, I'll share the link with you. Okay, now let me bring this up. I'm going to read what it says. And this section here, let me just transition over. This section is dealing specifically with Psalm 121. The one I read, it deals with that. You'll see. Let me just bring it up, and I'll read this quote, and then I'm going to point out what he's actually talking about. I found this, like I said, very uplifting, encouraging, and just very interesting when I read this. And once it was pointed out and I went and looked, I was like, oh, yes, it's there. It's definitely there. And I read through all 15 of these Psalms, and it's there. But this one is, like he says in this, it's most prevalent in this Psalm. But I'm going to show you. And it deals with the Hebrew poetry. Okay, let's bring this up. Like I said, this is Psalm 121. And, he's got the Psalm right here. Okay, now, but let's read this right here. It says, in this, the second of the 15 Psalms of degrees, right? It says, the particular characteristic of the series is fully marked. What he's going to point out, you can see it in his Psalm. It's more prevalent in this Psalm than it is in all the other ones that fall under this Song of Degrees or Song of Ascents or the songs of the goings up, some people refer to it as. It says, for the common title which they bear is not due to their being the songs of those who returned from Babylon, nor to their being festive pilgrim songs for the journey to Jerusalem, nor is it derived from the 15 steps which in the temple led up to the court of the women. We catch that? That's what you may or may not have heard. Most often I have heard them talk about the festive pilgrim songs for the journey to Jerusalem, as in when they were going to Jerusalem for the feast day, the 3 required feast days. They were supposed to present themselves before the Most High at the temple. You see what I'm saying? That's the way I've always heard this taught, and what that Song of Degrees or Song of Ascents refers to. And he says, no, not necessarily. And like I said, most of this, I did a bunch of research, and most of that comes from Talmudic tradition, specifically the Mishnah. And that, like I said, that's not to say that that's wrong or right. Don't know, we can't prove it. But what we can prove is what the text says, what we can see from the text. And that's what he goes on to say here. And this is the part I found interesting. Let's see. It says, their designation must be due to some internal connection of thought binding them together and marking them out as in some sense degrees or steps leading upward. That's what that Hebrew word, that's hence why in the English Standard Version it says ascents, and like I say, some people refer to it as the songs of the goings up or steps leading upward. That's what that Hebrew word behind that means, okay? But this part right here that I've got highlighted, continuing on the next page, it says, it has been ingeniously pointed out that these steps consist in the reiteration of a word or a thought in one clause, verse, or stanza, which in the next verse or stanza is used, as it were, as a step or degree by which to ascend to another and higher truth. Now, let's just point this out. Like it says right here, the reiteration of a word or a thought. Like I said, in the Western world, or in English specifically, poetry, like I said, most often revolves around the repetition of the sounds produced from pronouncing certain words. Rhyme time. There's you, a being punny. But you see that? Like I said, Hebrew poetry doesn't deal necessarily with the sounds of the words, but with the thoughts, the concepts the words convey, like he says, back to this, like he says, the reiteration of a word or thought occurring in one clause, verse, or stanza, right? Okay. Now he goes on in this and he starts pointing out all these repetitions, as he says, of a clause, a verse, or a stanza. Reiteration of a word or thought occurring in one clause, verse, or stanza, right? And he goes on and he points it all out here. And, you know, like I said, I'll share the link. You can get this and you can read all this for yourself. But I'm going to point this out to you. Now, let's go back. Now, what I did, I went through, and I may have missed some of these. So, you know, it was kind of confusing because I was trying to do this in 3 separate translations, both the Scripture Version, 2009, the Standard King James, and then the King James with the Strong's numbers. And I'm going to point out how some of these phrases, words, as he says, are repeated. And like he says, by which to ascend to another and higher truth. Now, what he's saying there, once I point this out to you, go back and read the Psalms with this thought in mind and look at what's being said. And then go and read. I would encourage you to go back and read all of these Psalms. Like I said, Psalm 120 through Psalm 134. And look for this concept and you'll see what I'm saying. And it's like, how to explain this? He'll state a concept in one verse, and he'll use the phrase from this verse he might use in the next verse or the next verse. You see what I'm saying? And he'll state another and higher truth. That's the way Edersheim classifies it. But it's like he goes from using whatever phrase, he states a general truth. And perhaps in the next verse or a verse down, he uses that same phrase. The writer uses the same phrase, and a more specific truth is revealed. Does that make sense? Like you said, another and higher truth. And like it's the concept, that word or that phrase that's used in one verse to state a general truth is used again in another verse to state a more specific truth. And once you understand that concept of the Hebrew poetry, you can go back and read it and you will see this. And when I first come across this a while back, and I went and I looked and I read, I thought this was very, very interesting. So now that we understand this concept that is dealt with in these specific Psalms, let's go back and let's look at Psalm 121 again. And you'll notice I have it highlighted and in multiple colors, so you'll see where a phrase or a word is used in one verse and then repeated in a different verse. And those two will be the same color, and then the next one will be a different color. It'll make sense once you see it. And like I said, I'll show you. Let's just go. Let me pull this up here. Hang on. Let me get this pulled up. Here. Let's shut that. Okay. Okay, I'm going to pull this up first in the Scripture Version 2009. And we'll look at it again. And you'll see the color coding. Don't necessarily have to read it again. I'll read it eventually in the King James so you can see it there. But let's just look at this. Now that you understand the concept I'm talking about, and I've got it color coded, so to speak, you'll see it. And this same concept, as stated before, goes from Psalm 120 to 134. Like I said, I encourage you, go read them and look for this. It's very interesting to see. Let's pull this up. As I said, Psalm 121 or Tehillim 121 from the Scripture Version 2009. You see how in verse 1, my help, and then in verse 2, it says my help. And then in verse 3, it says, does not slumber. And then in verse 4, it says, neither slumbers or sleeps. It's the same concept. In fact, it's actually the same Hebrew word. And then you see here in verses 3, 4, 5, 7, and 8, where it says, he who watches, guarding, your guard, guards, guards, guards. It's the same concept. In fact, it's the same Hebrew word. And that's what I'm going to point out in the here. Let's just pull this up and you'll see. Most of you understand what I'm about to show you, but for those who don't, you'll see the verse written out, and then after, either a word or a phrase, you'll see a little purple looking number, and it'll say H whatever. Well, that's the Strong's number that relates to the Strong's Concordance. Most of my viewers know what that is. And it shows you, basically, that's how you can go look up what the word is in Hebrew and see what the meanings are. Now, I'm not going to go through all that. By all means, please, I encourage you, go look all this stuff up and see. But I'm simply going to show you that how this orange, yellow, whatever color you want to call this, and this are in fact the same word in Hebrew. You'll see it when I show you, because the Strong's number after it are the same. And the same too with this light blue of the slumber, or neither slumbers, same thing. And then this purple, I guess you would call this light purple. These are all the same Hebrew words. Like I said, I'm going to pull this up in the Strong's, or in the King James that has the Strong's number. And you can see, sorry, my cat gets in my studio. But if you look, you can see it orange right here. It says Strong's H5828. That's the Hebrew word. And same thing here, my help. It says Strong's number H5828. It's the same word. Again, with the slumber, it's H5123. And right here, H5123. And then all the purple ones, starting right here, it says, he that keepeth is H8104. And then you see it again. Every one of these light purple ones highlighted, it's that same word. Do we see that? Now, like I said in the beginning, this psalm, this concept that goes throughout these psalms, 120 to 134, this concept is most prevalent in this psalm. You see this. If you go back and you read the other ones, you'll see it. If you look for it, you will see it. Now, depending on what translation you use, the words like here, let me pull this back up. Just for example, I'm going to put it back. You see the numbers are the same, right? Okay, let's just go straight to the King James. But you see how it says my help and my help, okay? And that's both in the Hebrew and in the English, it's the same words. Now, depending on what translation you read this from, the English rendering may not be the same, but with a little discernment, you will see that the concept, no matter what is written in English, the concept of these words will match. It will make sense. Like, let's go back to this. The Scripture 2009 shows what I'm talking about. See right here where it says, he who watches, but down here it says guarding, guard, 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 guard. It's rendered differently in the English, but it's the same Hebrew word. Do you see what I'm saying? Depending on what translation you read it in, it may not be rendered the same exact word and or phrase in the English, but in the Hebrew, it's most likely the same word, like I showed you through the Strong's numbers. But put it back to the King James. So we understand what I'm saying. This is just one of the examples of Hebrew poetry and what actually makes it poetry. Like I said in the beginning, in English, poetry is most often in our minds, when we think poetry, we think similar sounds from different words. Rhyme, time. Those two words, the meanings of those words have nothing to do with each other. It's simply the way the sounds that are produced when we pronounce those words. And that's poetry in English for the most part. Now, granted, the concept of Hebrew poetry doesn't deal with the sounds of the words so much as it deals with the concepts, the meanings of the words. Now, granted, in English, you will see that. If you look for it, you will see that in much, I ain't going to say much, in some of English poetry. But that's most often what Hebrew poetry is about. Either, most of you know this, two verses, like I said in the beginning, two verses saying the same thing but wording it different way. Or saying two opposite things. Showing you one end of the spectrum compared to the other end of the spectrum. But most often Hebrew poetry is dealing with concepts as opposed to the sounds produced when pronouncing the words. So with that in mind, go back and read not only Psalm 120 through 134 and look for this, as I've pointed out, but look for it in any of the poetical books. The Psalms, you see it. It jumps off the page at you in the book of Proverbs. But with all that said, I'll be done. And hopefully you got something out of that you never knew. Specifically, the songs of degrees, the songs of ascent, as in one phrase being spoken used twice, first in a general sense, in a general truth, and then used again in a more specific truth. Or as Edersheim said, a higher truth. But with that, let's read this psalm in the King James one last time before we go. Psalm 121, this is a song of degrees. I will lift up my eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither sleep nor slumber. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is thy keeper. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. Now let's read that last verse one more time and take that as your encouragement. No matter what's happening, just remember, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. And with that, I'll be done. Don't forget to vote Micah or Galatians in the comment section below. And I'll end this video like I end every one. Don't just read this thing, but chew on it. Shalom, shalom, folks.